Hi, this is Steve from yourcreativelife.com talking today about Zoom rooms versus in-person writers' rooms. Which is better? Now, I've had the unique experience and very grateful for the experience of having worked in writers' rooms that have been both or either in person, fully in person, or fully Zoom. And I will tell you that when I was on Stargirl, DC's Stargirl, a couple of seasons ago, that show was just about entirely on Zoom, except for 2 weeks. It was all during the pandemic, and Omicron came out. We went right back to Zoom. So all of that show pretty much was on Zoom. And then I just finished working on Tracker season one, where we had many months in person on the Fox lot. And then after the strike, we went to Zoom. And I've had the experience of being in plenty of other in-person rooms like American Crime and Covert Affairs and Tell Me Your Secrets and God Friended Me. And so I now have quite an entrenched and deep experience in both the Zoom room world and the in-person writers room world. And I'm here to talk about the differences. And you can decide what is better for you after I explain them. So the first thing is, let's talk about the regular in-person rooms. Now, pre-pandemic, I mean, this was all there were in-person rooms. You would sit at a long table in a conference room next to your colleagues, and you would chat all day. You'd get there at 10. You'd maybe leave the office at 5. You'd have lunch in between. You'd order lunch. You would brainstorm, as we do in the writer's room, and write on a big board against one wall or a couple of different walls. And the interaction in the in-person rooms is quite visceral. You're there with people. You're sharing food with them. If they, wear perfume or cologne, you can smell that. You're passing things across the table and sharing treats and chocolate and water and coffee and doing bagel runs and all sorts of things. And the energy in that room is really palpable, can be really great for brainstorming and for breaking story, and it can also be really fun. Most of the time, you'll also get an office down the hall where you can sort of set out your stuff and put out your toys and have your own space and retreat from the room, or go in there and do some writing and then come back into the room or do some research, or you can have other writers come in and hang out with you, or you can break off into subgroups. All of that stuff becomes really fun and, again, really visceral in an in-person writer's room. Also, during the day, you can also talk with people after and outside the room. Maybe there's something that comes up in the writer's room that you want to have a conversation with somebody about later on. Maybe there's an idea that you have sort of during lunch and you want to sort of take a showrunner aside and say, oh my God, I was just thinking about this and this and this. You also get the opportunity, which I think can be really fun, to see and find out about other people's loved ones. Quite often, if people have an office, they have a desk, and on that desk, there's a picture of a husband or a wife or kids or grandkids or dogs or any number of things. And it's a great way to get to know people. And there's something really intimate about the writer's room. So that's the in-person writer's room, and it can be really great, and it can be really fun. Now, here's the slight downside, is that most of us writers, me included, I'm an introvert. And so the challenge is sometimes it's not easy to be with people 8 hours a day, sort of like a regular job. Usually it's 10 to 5 here in the Hollywood space. But sometimes that can be really challenging, and it can be really exhausting. You also, of course, have to get up and get dressed and whatever, shave and all those things to go out into the real world and get to the office, brave traffic, especially in LA. So some of those things can be among the downsides of being in an in-person writer's room, even though the in-personness can be super fun and a super good time. There's also, I hadn't mentioned this, but there's also a visceral element in that quite often in an in-person writer's room, writers need something to fidget with, to play around with. And so we often have toys on the writer's room table, like, squeeze balls or, all sorts of things, fidget toys, and these things can also be fun. You might have clay or Play-Doh, and or coloring books, or you might have a notebook. There's all sorts of visceral things that people do while they're discussing, while they're thinking, while they're brainstorming, that is part of the in-person writer's room experience. And those too can be very fun. Now, let me talk about the Zoom experience. And it's interesting too, because I'm actually recording this on Zoom and later we'll put it on YouTube. Zoom is, as you know, I'm sure, incredibly user-friendly. And in the Zoom room, there's a real focus, I think, on the work. Not that people can't be focused in an in-person room, but in an in-person room, there are occasional distractions, and you might have, an amazing 50 minutes every hour of super focused work, and maybe 10 minutes of chit chat or a break, but in a Zoom context, if you're on Zoom, pretty much you're working. So when you come on Zoom in the morning, if you're on a show that, is on Zoom, you might have the barest few minutes of chit chat and then boom, right to the work. And the work can be really focused. There is no whiteboard, but there is, an electronic version where perhaps the writer's assistant will share her screen, his or her screen, and you'll get to see, whatever the blocks of story beats or a series of just ideas if you're brainstorming in some word processing document. All of those things you get to share in the space of a Zoom writer's room, because there's no other choice. It's the only way to share ideas. So there's a great and deep focus, I would say. But the other thing that I've discovered too about Zoom rooms is that in my experience, they're shorter. I have never been on a show where I'm on Zoom from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's way exhausting in the Zoom world. So usually on both the shows that used Zoom that I was on, the writers' rooms were very short, maybe 10 to 12, maybe 10 to 1, maybe 10 to 2 with some sort of break in between. Maybe you meet for a couple of hours and then everybody goes off to do some assignment. I think the Zoom room space is very user-friendly in that you can assign and dispatch people really easily. So you can send two people off into a separate Zoom room to brainstorm on an idea, or you can say, let's all divide up this storyline, and then you guys go off and do this, and you guys go off and do that, and by 3 o'clock, everybody email in a scene or a sample scene. So there's a lot more hands-on working in the space of the Zoom meeting, because it's much less productive to just be there chatting all day. So there's an immediacy. And actually, on both shows that used Zoom that I was on, we wrote scripts very fast, I think faster than the in-person space, because there was less Zoom meeting real estate and more actually going off and getting something down, get down a story area, get down an outline, get down pages of a script, a scene, an act, a teaser, all that stuff. And those things were much more immediate in the space of a Zoom room. And there's also the sense, and this is one of the downsides of the Zoom room, because I love rolling out of bed, throwing on some clothes, and, I don't have to prepare as much. Maybe I don't have to shave that day, or maybe I just, throw on a shirt and I'm still wearing my pajamas. All of those things happen on Zoom all the time. But I think the challenge can be in the Zoom room, the sense that I'm at home. So when I blur the lines between home and work, there's more of a potential in a Zoom room for me to work all the time, because I have never left the office. And there is a sense of, oh yeah, I want to be productive by the time I come back to the Zoom room. And so there may actually be more work going on, more writing going on, because there's less time in the Zoom room. The other downside, perhaps, of being on Zoom is that you don't get to know your colleagues as well. This is something that I deeply feel, like the notion of walking down the hall and chatting with somebody, or all of that stuff, having lunch together. Those things are not happening by and large in the Zoom room. I remember actually being on set for an episode of Tracker and seeing some really amazing props that they developed for this particular episode. And people were texting me, "Oh my God," when I sent pictures, "bring them back." And I thought, Bring them back. Okay. On the one hand, I really want to do that. On the other hand, we meet on Zoom. Like, bring them back and go to everybody's house and hand them out. Like, I'm not going to do that. So that's a downside of the Zoom room is there's less of a sense of intimacy. But again, finally, in the final analysis, for an introvert like me, Zoom could be pretty good because I don't have to go anywhere. And in some ways, that might be nice. So that's the difference. Those are the major differences between being in the writer's room on Zoom, being in a writer's room in person. Whatever is better is really sort of up to you, and of course, up to the showrunner and the production company, the studio, the network. They may all have opinions based on whether they have space that the show can, occupy, which definitely is a cost to the show if you're renting space at a studio or at some other office building. So all of those decisions get made from other people, by other people. And, Zoom can be really convenient and, of course, quite cost effective. So it's not always that, and quite rarely, that you'll get a choice as a writer on a show what kind of show, what kind of writer's room you'll have, whether it's virtual or in person. But now you know a little bit about the two differences, and you can decide for yourself which one might suit you better. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, if you learned something interesting and useful, give it a thumbs up. Spread the word. I've got over 100 videos on this YouTube channel, and I love making them, and I make and post a brand new video every single week for the enhancement of your creative life. Also, go to yourcreativelife.com and check out the hub for all things coaching, where you learn how I can help you enhance your own creative writing life. Find a link to this YouTube page, sign up for my newsletter, learn about my podcast, The Secret Writer Podcast, and tell your friends. So thanks for watching. I will see you next time.